Get more confidence. Get that promotion. Get moving up the corporate ladder. Get a better gig with an MBA from Mays Business School at Texas A&M University. Whether you're starting out or stepping up, now you can take your career to a whole new level with a full-time MBA in College Station and convenient weekend options at Houston City Center. Texas A&M has a program to suit your schedule. Visit mba.tamu.edu. And Giga Maggie.
Howdy, welcome to Mays MasterCast. I'm Shannon Deere, the Associate Dean for Undergraduate Programs, here with your tremendous host, Ben Wiggins.
Thanks, Shannon. You're an outstanding Associate Dean for Undergraduate Programs.
Thanks. Are you feeling tremendous today?
I'm feeling very tremendous today. Brielle is also feeling tremendous today after a difficult weekend.
I am glad to hear that she is feeling better, for sure.
It's a tremendous day in Aggie Land.
It is a beautiful day in Aggie Land. Love it here. Loving it. We're getting into that. Well, we've had really good weather since September, so I'm not going to complain, but we're getting into that sweet spot of the best weather. Love it.
Yeah, exactly right.
Today on the show, we have Tarek Ghalayini. Tarek is the global leader of Alix Partners e-discovery practice. He guides and prepares clients for large cross-border matters involving data mining. He has been called the Sherlock Holmes of data, which I particularly like that reference. And he is a licensed attorney with a background in accounting and finance. Tark works closely with counsel, corporate clients, and financial advisors to quickly and efficiently tackle complex electronic data problems in global litigation, financial investigations, regulatory industries, and restructuring matters. Tarek is known for developing and executing effective and straightforward solutions that bring clarity and consistency to cross-border and local matters alike. Prior to working at Alix Partners, he was a consultant at Huron Consulting Group and an associate at Ernst & Young. Tarek has some very interesting experiences under his belt, including working in Hong Kong for a period of time, and he talks about that on the show, which is really interesting, and the adjustment that was required there. He is an active member of the State Bar of Texas and the U.S. Supreme Court Bar. We welcome Tarek to the show.
Let's do it. We welcome Tarek Ghalayini to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for having me.
It is our pleasure. How was your weekend?
Good. It was a balmy 70 degrees in Houston this weekend in the middle of winter. So, another day in Texas.
Indeed. But if you don't like the weather, wait 15 minutes because it'll change again.
Exactly.
Where did you grow up?
So I actually grew up in Houston, Texas. So born and raised down here. Yeah.
How many in your family?
So I have one older brother, one older sister.
Tell us about Thanksgiving for you as a kid.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. So both of my parents are immigrants, and so I had the wonderful experience of growing up as an American kid with all of these outside sort of influences that I didn't really realize were there. And so, it wasn't until I went to A&M that I actually knew this wasn't exactly a Thanksgiving tradition. But every year, my parents are, really embrace the American kind of culture. And so they wanted us to, experience life as Americans. So obviously there's no more American tradition than Thanksgiving. And so every year we'd have this big Thanksgiving party, and it was, we'd invite friends and family, and it was this big, wonderful get together. And so, but my father's Lebanese, my mom's Cuban. And so the cuisine was very, heavily influenced, I would say, by that. We didn't really know the cranberry sauce side of it. For us, it was hummus. And so it wasn't until I went to A&M and I went to other Thanksgivings that I was like, I thought hummus was like a Thanksgiving staple, and then come to find out that was only at our house.
I think I want to add hummus this Thanksgiving.
Highly recommend it.
Yeah. Why not? We can all be multicultural.
It goes great with turkey. So give it a shot.
Yeah. What was your very first job?
So my very first job was I worked for a company that this was in high school. So I worked for a company that did like consumer research, right? So like the people that call you on a Saturday morning or right as you're sitting down for dinner,
Yes.
that was me. And so it was a really fascinating job. I don't know that still exists in the form that it did then. But yeah, it was very interesting.
Any funny stories from any of that?
Oh my God, so many. I mean, it was, you're catching people first of all, nobody wants to talk to you.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
Even the folks who were super nice, were like, we're not really that interested. So, you would, there was a few folks that you would call, they would sit down, they'd be sitting down at dinner. So you had a whole bunch of rejections, but then the people that I found that wanted to talk to you wanted to just talk to anybody. So they would do your survey and then and then you'd be on the phone for 45 minutes talking about, what they were doing. It was very
Right.
interesting. So I learned a lot about, people, and I have sort of facts in my head, from random strangers that, shared a lot more than I had bargained for.
Give us 60 seconds on your road through Maze and beyond.
Yeah, I had such a great experience at A&M, at the Mays Business School. We're an Aggie family, so my older brother and older sister both went to the business school. So at that, by the time I sort of was looking at colleges and all of that, Mays was the bar for me. And I was like, if I can find something better, well, that's the bar. And I didn't. To me, Mays was such an outstanding place to learn, because I think it brought together, a lot of the important factors beyond just, capability of, what's in the books. It was the culture. It was, the Aggie family. It was the concept that, you learn not just by reading, but by doing and interacting with the business community. And so, that really was what got me there. And then I think, I stuck around as long as possible and went through, the PPA program, which was an excellent experience. And, I never looked back.
Yeah. What drew you to wanting to become an attorney?
As a kid, I always was fascinated by that kind of nexus between, history and business, right? And the law, it kind of is that, right? The law sort of represents, what that is. But more than that, I think as I grew up, and I didn't go to law school straight away. I worked for a few years and then sort of let this concept that had been in my head simmer for a while. And then what really ultimately got me across the line was that the more involved I got into the consulting world and helping other businesses resolve their problems, the more I realized that, a law degree and that training is really in a sense learning the rules of the game, right? Whether you practice or you don't, I think there is something about the legal training and that mindset of problem solving, and doing it within the construct of the rules that we have in our society. And that was ultimately, I think, what really drew me to finally go to law school, get my license and all of that.
As you were making that decision, what's the biggest misconception you see young people having about becoming a lawyer?
That you have to be a lawyer. I mean, that you have to practice.
Oh, okay.
I think, and as I look now, sort of a little bit later in my career, as I look back at a lot of my, friends and colleagues from law school and where they are today, a lot of them don't end up practicing law necessarily. I mean, a lot of them end up in these great business roles, that they draw on their legal experience. If you end up, not surprisingly in politics, if you end up doing other things, but to me, certainly what's unique, about that profession, versus becoming a doctor, right? You become a doctor to go and help people and work in that field. To become a lawyer, you don't necessarily need to practice as a lawyer. you can take those lessons and they're really highly transferable to other disciplines and act as sort of a way to turbocharge great knowledge of those other disciplines.
What does it mean to be a part of the Supreme Court bar?
I went to law school in DC, and I had the real fortune of working with some really outstanding legal minds while I was there through various internships for some professors. And, so the Supreme Court bar, I think, is really a high honor that, you get to, and it comes with, sort of a great ability to go and sit in and listen on arguments and participate in sort of how that bar develops, thought and theory. And so that to me was really just a special honor that I was very lucky to kind of be a part of.
Yeah. So let's move forward. Tell us about, if you would, tell us about your progress after that. And I'm especially interested in hearing about your early days in Hong Kong.
Yeah. So after school, after Mays, I worked in consulting, really initially starting in sort of the audit side of the house, working in Big Four and that in that career. And then, the more I really learned about, what the consulting world has to offer and what the various, tracks were, I sort of evolved to this area of, working in the legal space. And this was actually before law school. And so, my curiosity sort of took me to, different firms and different kinds of practices that would work, within that legal construct of, pre-litigation or post-litigation, on helping attorneys develop strategies and theories on, various parts of a matter. And then I had the real fortune, pretty early on in my career to come across the firm where I'm currently situated. And, we didn't have that practice. It wasn't something that really existed, or certainly not in its current form. So, I had the real luck early on to sort of watch how, this new business was developed, both at my firm, but also in the marketplace. And so as part of that, we're a firm that operates in many countries around the world. And during that time, we were really aggressively expanding, and we had expanded into the Hong Kong and Greater China market. And so, I had the opportunity to go over there with the firm as we were expanding into that market, and I took it, and it was a really, I think, formative experience. Certainly from all perspectives. I mean, from a personal standpoint and from a professional standpoint.
What was your time like there? We spoke about this last week, and you shared some of the difficulties that you encountered once you were there.
Yeah, it was challenging, no doubt. I mean, there was, I think, certain things when I was thinking about going, you sort of ask yourself the obvious questions, okay, well, is this good for my career? What are the things I'm going to be tasked with? And, how can I impact change? And will I be able to impact change in a meaningful way, for the plan that we have? That was all pretty straightforward. And I had a lot of great support at the firm in terms of helping me think through our strategy and how I fit in. The part that I really didn't anticipate and probably should have spent more time thinking about was sort of my own, personal, how that would impact my personal life or my personal perspective on things. And really going over there, I didn't know anybody. I didn't speak the language. Certainly not in mainland China. I really had no business contacts. And so it wasn't enough to just have to go and develop new relationships and new clients and, new capabilities. Even with all the support that I had at the firm, it was also, well, what do you do on your nights and weekends? And how do you interact with, social community there that, I don't know yet. And that was I think that was a real challenge. And, I think for the first time, just very candidly, I felt very alone in sort of this decision that I had made, and also committed to making it work and finding success in it.
How did the process of coming through that, was there anything specific that you did in order to battle the loneliness, or was it just like keep putting one foot in front of the other and eventually it got better?
Yeah, I think it was certainly more the latter, right? Just, like any real problem, any challenge, it's not really solved with one thing. It's solved with 100 little things. And so, it really was more of that. It was, okay, here are the things I'm going to do from a business standpoint to go and do the things that I've committed to doing. But then here are the things that I'm going to do and kind of go out into the world and, meet people and make connections and contacts that are personally gratifying, right? Here are the clubs and communities I can get involved with that are interesting to me personally, and being patient with, that process. I certainly think that putting one foot in front of the other, and it did, and it was a great, really, I look back on that as a wonderful experience. But it was challenging, certainly.
You've talked about the multinational nature of the company. Can you tell us a story about a particularly elegant solution you provided to a client on cross-border matters?
Yeah, so I think we've given the way our firm works and really the talented folks that we have here, we do get these wonderful opportunities to take on really impactful cases. And it's really been the great privilege of my career to get to work alongside some of these folks and work on some of these matters with, our clients who are facing, real challenges. And we really take that, to heart. So early on, before, the discovery world that I kind of work in was what it was. And before we had the technology that we do, cross-border matters were particularly challenging because you would have to go and seek out various components of data. You'd have to understand the different stakeholders, what were the jurisdictional requirements, and sometimes they're competing. And when this was sort of starting to come up, when you started having these large, really complicated cross-border matters, one of the things that we were able to do early on was to really assist our clients was to, kind of replicate the look and feel of what we do, right? So if we had a standard case in the U.S., right, we would kind of assemble all of this data. We would, get it into a format that was really useful. We would find folks and work with our clients to, get at the stuff that really needed to be looked at that was meaningful for a case or for an investigation. When you had cross-border matters, it's that issue multiplies because now you can't really move data between places necessarily, particularly if you're dealing in certain jurisdictions, certain parts of Europe. And so that was really where we were able to come up with the solution of mimicking our data centers as a simple example, right? Where we would say, okay, we've got a data center in London, we've got a data center in Shanghai, we've got a data center in outside of Chicago. Let's make them look and feel exactly the same so that if our clients are logging in, and again, now this is sort of today, this is not such a unique idea. This is something that's part and parcel to the work that we and so many others do. But then it really was novel. And it was a great example of how we were able to move quickly and simplify something that was pretty complicated.
Yeah. So in making them look and feel the same, what was the most obvious way that manifested relative to other things that were out there at the time?
I think at the time, all technology was pretty disjointed. So depending on where you were, you're dealing in multiple languages and all of that, you sort of would pick and choose a toolkit based on the specific needs of the case, as well as the region of the world you're in, the part of the world you're in. Yeah. What we did and again, this is not groundbreaking today.
Yeah, no, I understand.
But certainly what we were able to do was, find that toolkit that would be applicable in multiple jurisdictions with multiple kind of competing interests, and use that as sort of a baseline, and then carry anything behind the scenes that was really unique, but that our really core clients, when they would get in to see what was there, it didn't matter if they were looking in Shanghai or London or Chicago. It felt like AlixPartners.
You've been described as sort of a Sherlock Holmes for data. Is this an accurate description of what you do? What's a good analogy for you?
I don't know. I think Sherlock is certainly more clever than I am. But I think an element of that it may be applicable is in the nature of the work, right? So the work that I do is investigative by nature, right? We are trying to find the needle in the haystack. We're trying to, particularly in today's world where data volumes are just massive, and so that is what I'm seeking out is a particular a story, really, and trying to tell a story with huge amounts of data that are relevant, that are easily digestible, and that are meaningful to answering some question. So in that sense, I think I am in the team that I work with, we are sort of detectives working alongside our clients to really try and answer tough questions about what happened and when. And the real benefit that I've had in my career, so this is where I think I differ a little bit from Sherlock, maybe I'm more of a Watson, is that I work with a lot of Sherlocks. I work with a lot of folks who are investigators by nature, and who are experts in a particular field. And so they can look at financial statements and accounting records, and to them, there's clues all over the place on what may have happened at a particular moment in time. And my job it is more akin to Watson in that I'm there to assist putting all the puzzle pieces together so that they can ask the tough questions and the right questions that are unique to that particular problem.
If we think of Watson as kind of the ethical grounding, like the sort of emotional center of the Sherlock Holmes mythos, what does your ethical mindset look like in the work that you're doing and your life in general? How do you have to put your money where your mouth is on ethics, so to speak?
I mean, I think ethics is at the core of what I do as a profession. I mean, if you look at just starting at the most basic level, right? If you look at lawyers, they are grounded by, despite all the lawyer jokes out there, I mean, lawyers really are grounded by a pretty rigorous set of ethical rules.
Yeah.
In terms of understanding that you have a fiduciary obligation, understanding that you have, an obligation to protect your clients and protect their information, and do so really vigorously. I mean, there are very few exceptions, and there are a few other careers and professions that have that kind of privilege. But even more so than that, I mean, I'm not a practicing lawyer, today, and so the work that I do is really grounded in just a sense of ethics, and the firm that I work at is grounded in a really an important kind of ethical understanding that what we do is really requires a tremendous amount of trust, and so we take that trust very seriously. Clients are trusting us with their companies, with their livelihoods, with matters that can really disrupt the way that they are able to work and provide value to the market. They trust us with their information, and so to me, it really forms the basis and the core of everything that we do. We cannot and we will not violate our own ethics for anything. And I think that's important. There's a famous Warren Buffett quote when he was dealing with a particularly troubling issue with one of their portfolio companies, and ethical violations. And he said, you can lose money for Berkshire Hathaway and I will be forgiving. But if you lose a shred of our integrity, I will be relentless. I will be relentless in my pursuit of you. And it was on the one hand sort of supportive, but I think what it really says, and I think this forms such a wonderful construct for how I view ethics, is that ethics is the long game. It is your name in the market. It is your name among your friends and your family and your community that you can be relied upon and trusted with their most important things and matters and secrets. And it's also an acknowledgement that that doesn't change with the tides of what may be happening today or tomorrow. And we don't make decisions like that. So if it bumps up against our ethical boundaries, it's an easy decision. And the answer is no.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have found, it seems, a good fit, like that your values and the company's values seem to be a good fit because, you've stayed there for 17 years. What, aside from your perspective on ethics, because it seems like I'm sure there's this very strong overlap there between what you believe personally and what the company believes. Does the alignment between your other values and the firm's other values play a role in your job satisfaction?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think that's necessarily unique to me.
Yeah.
I think certainly, but for me, yeah, absolutely. I think being at a place, where, there isn't that tension between what I feel is right and what those around me feel is right, is a huge contributor to overall satisfaction. There's that concept of, the whole person comes to work, it is absolutely true. And I think that certainly as I've grown up, in the firm, as I've grown up in my career, as a person really in the world, to me, minimizing those tensions of what I think is right and wrong with the people that I'm surrounded with, is probably the single biggest determining factor of individual happiness and satisfaction. Because if you feel like you're constantly at odds ethically, or with your value system, with the folks that you spend the most time with, well, I think that's got to be a stressful scenario. So yeah, I have found a home in that, and I certainly appreciate that as we've grown, we've never deviated from our values-based view of the world, our long-term view of the world, and our insistence on adhering to that and holding each other accountable for that shared value system.
Then moving forward, what do you think the biggest changes will be in data management for your company and for others over the next decade?
Decade's a long time.
Sure is.
World. But I think some of the trends are obvious, right? The volume and velocity of data continues to increase at exponential rates.
Yeah.
I think also and I use this word intrusion, not as a negative, but I think the fact of the matter is so many of our personal details become now sort of available to the world and vice versa, right? You can see what somebody's doing halfway across the world. Social media continues to define and then redefine how we view the world. And you see the impact is so far reaching. Certainly, and you look at the political world, you look at people's views and where they get their information and how impactful that can be and influential. And I think that's part of the evolution. And I do think in that sense, broadly, we're going to learn a lot about kind of the psychology of this kind of information sharing, this kind of massive data lake that is out there, and how we use those things will certainly be an important topic, going forward. In terms of the business that that I'm in, I think what's going to happen over the next, decade, and it will happen in, I think, rapid succession, will be an increased reliance on doing things a little smarter. Big data volumes aren't going to be an issue as much as they have been, in the sense that it's just going to be part of the landscape. And so you're going to start to see things in artificial intelligence and analytics, which have already been super impactful over the last 4 or 5 years. You'll see that accelerate. And I think what will evolve is a data environment that is extremely sophisticated, that you have tools that can get at complex data, even large amounts of it, and really boil it down to constructs and stories that are useful in everyday life. I think we've surpassed the point where there's so much data that it's almost useless. And so now we're sort of, the last few years, and I think the next 10 years, we'll be grappling with this idea of how do you manage, to deal with this, but also make it super useful. How do you extract from that data stories that not only have the data points that you want, but capture the texture of what you're trying to get at.
You mentioned story a couple of times, and I think something that I'm noticing is showing up more and more in business. Donald Miller building a story brand. I think business is accepting the power of story as maybe the supreme method of communication. Is that, would you say that's accurate? Is there any better way to get a message across than by telling a story?
Not if you want people to remember it. I think that's the piece of it that, and that's been true throughout human history. I mean, I think, some of the greatest stories, some of the greatest ancient philosophers never wrote a thing down, but yet their stories live with us today. And I think that's to me, that's extremely telling, because you look at old fables, and you look at, each stories have this way to sort of resonate with people. They draw out emotion, but what really is the result of that is it leaves impressions. And so, and I think businesses today want to leave an impression. And I think that the more they can craft a story around what they're doing, the better. It's better for the brand. It resonates with people more, assuming it's done well.
Yeah.
But the flip side of that is that a negative story is hard to shake as well. Yeah. And so, yeah, I absolutely think there's a power in that, and I think that lives with us in a lot of the stories that we hear today about things that folks are doing in terms of how they're impacting the world, how companies are impacting the world. But that's no different than, stories that were told, in ancient Rome, that were carried down from one generation to the next and somehow survived to current day. So absolutely, I think the power of storytelling is, it continues to be, take a great hold on the lens through which we look at the world.
Yeah. I mean, it's Maya Angelou. How you made them feel. That's what sticks with people.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
All right, let's move to some rapid fire. What do you consider your most valuable failure?
I mean, there's a long list. I think the one that continues to plague me, at home is my thinking that I can assemble or repair almost anything. In fact, I am unable to repair and assemble almost anything.
I also am unable to assemble or repair almost anything. Fortunately for me, I've been aware of this shortcoming and have chosen not to test it any more often than absolutely necessary.
Yes, and that's why I think it's a valuable lesson. I'm starting to realize now, so I don't even bother.
Yeah. If you could have anyone as a mentor for one day, living or dead, who would it be?
Oh my God. There was a guy, this is such an obscure answer, but there was a guy.
That's better.
His name was Ibn Battuta. He is an old Arab traveler, and way back before traveling was a thing, he spent 40 years of his life traveling the world and journaling. I would love to sit down with that guy for a day.
Yeah, I'm gonna go look that guy up.
See what he saw. Yeah, it's a book. It's a book that he wrote a journal. Again, I'm ruining your rapid fire. He wrote a journal that if you ever have time to read it, it's absolutely outstanding. And it's this journal that he kept as he traveled the world, hundreds of years ago. And it's a book that my dad gave me when I was much younger that always stuck with me. And I was like, man, if I can just get that guy, over to dinner, I have so many questions.
Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna go look it up. Look up the journal. Thanks for that answer. What important truth do very few people agree with you on?
Well, there are facts certainly in life that people's truths can be different. Mm-hmm. And that, truth to somebody is not just the facts of what they're dealing with, but really the multiple layers of their perspectives and experiences and the lens through which they see those facts. Mm-hmm. That's why I bump up against that a lot.
Yeah. What is the book you've given most often as a gift?
The Art of War.
Oh,
The Art of War. That. Yeah.
Great. If you could have a billboard anywhere with anything on it, where would it be and what would it say?
I think it would be in Times Square, and I think it would just say, "Be kind."
Love that.
Just remind people, just be a little nicer.
Yeah. Life is better.
I'm picking on Times Square, but they've got great foot traffic.
Yeah, of course. Well, and a ton of billboards.
Right.
So yes, anyone you would like to send good bull as we close?
There are so many, but I would certainly like to call out my two siblings. The two first Aggies I ever knew, for opening a door to me, that still lives with me today, and they're two of the people I most admire in this world. And really just the business school for creating such a wonderful experience that I still draw from.
Gig 'em. Tark, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate the conversation.
Thanks so much. This was really a lot of fun, and I appreciate you guys having me on. And hopefully we got something good out of here.
We hope you enjoyed the episode with Tarek. For our MasterCast top 3 takeaways, I wanted to start with him being the Sherlock Holmes of data. And I wanted to see if you had a character that you felt like described your job.
Which are you talking about? Like
any
my
of your jobs?
Role with the MasterCast, or my role with Calumet Investment Partners, or
any of your jobs?
Any of my jobs.
Do you have something you think about? The Sherlock Holmes of investments.
I'm more like the Lestrade of investments. And like the Sherlock Holmes of investments would come in and tell me like all the many things that I'm doing wrong. And then I would make a sour face as he walked out of the room, or she, and then say, "How did you figure all that out?" Let's see. I have a bunch of stuff, like puzzle stuff, like, I don't know, like Rubik's cubes and stuff around my office. So in that way, like, it's not exactly a Sherlock Holmes feel to it. More of a, I don't know, kind of a like wannabe cut rate John Nash from A Beautiful Mind or something. Okay. I feel like it's just or like Rust Cole from True Detective with like there's just the stuff up on the walls and again, I'm like the third rate like understudy Rust Cole, but with the stuff up on the walls and the scars and Carcosa and the Yellow King and so forth. So yeah, I'm like that for investment.
I like that.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, totally. I put you on the spot too, because that's a hard question to answer, but also you're underplaying your connection with that role. But Tarek underplayed his connection with Sherlock Holmes too, but I believe he is the Sherlock Holmes of data and not the Watson. So just saying. All
right, I'm gonna flip it around. I'm gonna put you on the spot. What are you to associate deaning among undergraduate programs?
I don't know. I was trying to think of something too, and I have got nothing. But I don't know characters as well as you do. I don't feel like.
That's interesting because I feel like you're familiar with more characters than I am familiar with.
Yeah, but probably not the depth.
Maybe.
Did you see the movie Enola about Sherlock Holmes' sister?
Half of it.
Oh, you are a hater. Well, I wouldn't mind being her. She was crafty. I liked it, but that's
She
not really
was
my
crafty.
style.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know who I would be. I think you've said before, I figure out what's important and focus on that, and then work really hard to figure it out or to address it.
Yeah. Yeah, you're very assertive, which I like. That makes our working relationship very straightforward almost all of the time. And yeah, you're very good at seeing through to kind of the heart of things.
But who's that? Probably the reason it's hard to think of is there's no women on TV that are. That's not true that there's none, but there's not that many. Do you know Kim Wexler from Better Call Saul? That's why I want to be on TV.
Oh,
I like
interesting.
her.
I have seen. I watched the first season of Better Call Saul.
Well, you made it through a whole season. I'm proud of you. Must have been a great show.
It is a very good show. I enjoyed it a lot. But Kim Wexler, good character.
But
I like that choice.
She makes some dumb relationship decisions. I yell at her a lot on the screen, but she makes good professional decisions, I feel like.
It's good to be able to parse those things. No character is not universal.
True. For our second takeaway, I wanted to circle back to something that we talked about a little bit on Rogelio's episode, and he talked about a lot, in that you don't even know that your culture is unique until you get outside of your family.
Yep.
I think, and Tarek talked about it in the context of Thanksgiving. He didn't know it wasn't normal to have hummus at Thanksgiving. And I think that that's true. For me, I thought my family was so normal and like every other family, probably until I got married and then really saw the inner workings of another family. And I realized that my family is not normal, or at least that not every family is like mine. My family also,
or maybe more precisely, there is no. I don't know if there is a normal. You know, what is what is normal?
Yeah, for sure.
You know, I mean, there's healthy and unhealthy, but there's a wide range of what constitutes a healthy family upbringing. Massively wide range.
Yeah, but it's easy to think like, well, everyone does this on whatever day, or everyone would do that. My family does this really weird thing. It all goes back to the fact that my dad hates being alone. And so they'll do these really dumb things with cars. Like because no one wants to be in a car by themselves. And so we'll drive well, let me drive you there, and then you can meet them halfway, and then we'll leave that car there, and then we'll drive here, and Ryan's like, oh man, that's my maiden name's Knight. And he's like, I don't know, but that's some night car switching going on. Like, we're going to have to simplify this plan a lot. I'm like, okay, thanks for letting me know.
Right. Madison, my lovely wife, has an uncle whose name is David Perry. And one of David Perry's favorite jokes, anytime something like that happens, we're planning doing something strange or somebody did something strange. Every time it happens, it's always, this sounds like one of those Rydeen things to me. Her maiden name is Rydeen.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
And he always says it in that same kind of mustache twirly way. I love it. It's such a good joke every time. Just blame it on the Rydeens.
But it's true. There are those like ways of doing things, right? That each family has that seem totally normal to the kids, at least the kids in that family.
Yeah. Well, the kids and then their kids, because his wife is a Rydeen, and then her brother, my wife's dad, and their whole family, 4 kids. So it's a good sized family. They have their Rydeen way of doing things.
Yeah.
It's always fun.
For our last takeaway, I wanted to talk about Tark's experiences in Hong Kong. He said something I think is really important, that's important for me to think about too. And it was that he thought about how the move to Hong Kong was going to affect him professionally, but he didn't really think about how it was going to affect him personally. And it was much more challenging than he had imagined, even in the little things. And how it wasn't one big thing that improved the situation for him. It was hundreds of little things that made it better. I thought both of those things were really insightful, that he didn't think about the personal, he thought about the professional. And then it took 100 little things living there to really make the connections with people that were going to make it a better experience.
That was my exact experience in LA, by the way.
I imagine it's that way for a lot of those big moves. I had an opportunity to either come to A&M or to go to Russia with PwC. And had I stayed at PwC, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. I would have gone and not thought about any of those things. So that really struck me that sometimes I still wish I had gone because I now know I could have come back to A&M at a different time. I probably wouldn't have met my husband. So I'm glad I didn't go in that regard. But I mean, I wouldn't have thought about any of those things. I definitely would have been blindsided by how hard it was personally to make that transition for sure. I wouldn't have thought about that. So I think it's not to say don't make those moves, but maybe put some plans in place before you do that are going to make the personal side a little bit easier.
Well, I like whatever chain of events brought you right here.
Me too. Isn't it? Doesn't it always feel like it's the way it's supposed to be?
Yeah, far more often than not.
Yeah. Nice. Well, we hope you enjoyed the episode with Tarek. Ben, do you want to close us with a quote?
I would love to close us with a quote. Jeff Greenleaf said once, measure people by the size of the things that anger them. And to me, then like a question that's even maybe kind of the meta next question is, does that mean that the biggest person, the biggest mind, that there's nothing that angers them, or that everything angers them, or like the right things anger them in quotes? Right.
Yeah.
So that's a fascinating one, but it's almost more interesting for the questions that come out of it as it is for the quote itself. So measure people by the size of things that anger them.
That's interesting.
It's a good one to think about.
My sister and I have learned a lot of working with each other now on our business. We've learned a lot about each other. And one of the things that we say is that I have a short fuse with a small explosion, and she has a really long fuse with a big explosion. And it's interesting. I don't know. And again, I don't know what's good or bad, but I tend to kind of easily get annoyed, but my annoyance is really small.
I was hoping that you would say, I think I'm 5'9", or my anger is 5'9", because my sister is 5'9", and she's what makes me really angry.
No, she doesn't make me angry.
I don't feel like you have a short fuse. I feel like so allow me to propose a revision to this theory. I think you're very quick to see things that are inefficient and say, hey, let's fix that. But if you get annoyed easily, I feel like I don't experience your annoyance very often, but I often experience your notes in terms of, hey, this needs to be better. And that's not, I don't know. It's a suggestion, not necessarily a statement of annoyance. I don't think I don't know. Maybe I've experienced you differently than your sister has. I'm sure that's true.
For sure.
But even as a business colleague and and an associate, I don't know.
I get annoyed. I get impatient a lot, I would say.
Okay, that I agree with, but I feel like it's a healthy impatience. No, clearly there's a better way of doing this. Why don't we just do B instead of A? And that answer is almost always right.
Yeah. Some people might think it's less healthy than you do.
Well, to those people, I send your grumpy cat face.
They have seen my grumpy cat face, I'm sure.
And that's why we're here. Welcome to the Maze MasterCast.
Well, we hope you enjoyed the episode today. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for tuning in.
An MBA from Texas A&M University can take your career to a whole new level. With full-time and weekend options, Texas A&M suits your schedule. So get a better gig. Visit mba.tamu.edu.
Looking to start a podcast? Trying to tackle questions like, how do I record? How do I edit? How can I get music for my show? What equipment do I need? How do I distribute it? Good news. The podcast architects are here to help. Whether that's from start to finish, fixing the audio quality, helping you get the episodes posted, go to podconsulting.co. Everyone has something worth sharing with the world.